Welcome back to Corner Cafe, and this is our nonprofit feature, and I am excited. We have a very, very unique nonprofit, Trueface, and we have Robby Angle, the president and CEO, on the phone. Hey, hey.
Hey, Rachel. Good to be here with you.
Good to have you, man. When they reached out, I have a sweet friend, Kaylee Keller, who is connected to your organization via her brother, who works for you, and she told me about your nonprofit. I was very intrigued. I have never seen anything like this, Trueface. So explain to the listeners, what is this all about?
Yeah, Trueface is a 26-year-old parachurch ministry. So faith-based organization that supports churches, individuals, organizations. It's been around 26 years, and
wow.
I was leading at a large church north of Atlanta, and I read a book by these guys called Trueface. I had no clue who they were, but I loved reading. I read this book called The Cure. It changed my life. It was one of my favorite books. So I was just a fangirl of these guys in Phoenix writing this content, teaching. So I started reading everything I could, and I was at a pretty large church in Atlanta, so I started bringing their teaching into the organization. I bought enough books that eventually the guys called me and said, "Who are you buying cases and cases?"
That's hilarious.
Books,
yeah.
By the hundreds. And so I got to know them, and a couple of years ago I transitioned into the ministry. It's a small ministry that develops relational discipleship tools to equip individuals in the churches to apply truths in relationships. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I've been thinking lately, and I've gone to a lot of great churches and stuff, so it's nothing negative towards that. But I do feel that we kind of lack discipleship in the body of Christ. And just recently, and I've been a believer for a while, I'm like, I kind of like to get discipled, maybe more strategically and not so, I don't know, I just kind of feel like there's a gap. And it seems like you felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, like most of us would say that God has designed us to grow through the context of relationships. Yeah. God is relational. He made us relationally. Jesus modeled this relational discipleship, and then he said, go and make disciples.
Right.
And everything is relational, and what I made possible is relational. So we're designed to grow through relationships, but relationships that actually lead to growth, not just like supper club or casual, but actually lead to growth, are hard for us to find and come by, which means it's not easy. And so we function in that space of how do we make it easier for people to connect relationally to grow spiritually, which is discipleship. And Jesus defined discipleship as the way you love one another. Mm-hmm. By this, they'll know that you are my disciples, by the way you love one another, in John 13. So it's like there's a one another love interaction as the body of Christ, but that's hard, it's clunky, it's weird. So how do we make it less weird, less difficult, and easier? Because it's so critical. And a lot of us do that. A lot of the churches try, but it's hard. And I've worked with a lot of churches to figure this out. And it's not easy because people are not easy and simple. So, yeah.
Yeah, so give me an example of a church or organization that comes to you. What are maybe some of the two top challenges, and then how do you work to establish this relationship thing and get the juices flowing, if you will, towards healthy discipleship?
Yeah, well, statistically, the majority of churches have some type of small group model. The Master Plan of Evangelism is a great book from like 30 years ago. The Master Plan of Evangelism is, look at what Jesus did. He invested in 12 and 3 deeply, 12 consistently, and that changed the world.
Right.
And so nothing new under the sun. Churches, as soon as they get more than like a couple hundred people, the tension is how do we create community at a depth where people can be more known and more loved and process real issues. So we develop small groups, cell groups, small groups, some type of life groups. House churches look like small groups that are, in different degrees. So we gather together in small groups to be known and to be loved for the past couple thousand years. Now, what we do in that is a big wild card, because a lot of us listening have tried small groups, and even like Young Life, Navigators, Bible studies.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of small group components. Organizations gather in leadership teams in order to get things done and move the needle. But whether that small group of people is a waste of time or transformational is the space we love to try to take truths and help people lead more transformational environments of grace, of a high trust environment, versus kind of supper club, casual, or like rigid prescriptive discipleship programs. Because I'm not going to go in like a gold star, check the box, behavior modification, like be a better Christian group.
Right.
But on the other hand, I'm not going to be in the laissez-faire supper club. So what does that middle look like of real community with real intentionality? Because really following Jesus is something we can learn and do together. And so depending on the environment, some churches we work with to create a holistic plan for how to create community that aligns with their goals for spiritual formation or discipleship that they have.
Okay.
Church members.
Okay, great. So, so I'm a pastor. I have a church of 200 people. We have small groups going on in maybe 5 houses, and they have leaders. So then, practically speaking, I would get the leaders in with you guys, and you guys would kind of coach the leaders on how to have this cultivating environment within the home. Maybe what's one of the tips that you guys would share?
We want to. That's a great question, and practically we don't work as directly as much as creating tools to equip you as the pastor to help lead and develop. So we have a 9-month group discipleship initiative that you as a pastor could do with those 6 small group leaders to really pour your cup into them to develop the small group leaders deeply.
Right.
That's like an intensive offering tool we have to make it easier for you to go, hey, I want to pour my cup into 7 or 8 other people. How do we do that?
Right.
We've captured and synthesized best practices from hundreds of people doing that to create a tool to make it easier for you to do that on an intense level. But on an easier level, we partnered with Right Now Media, who they work with about 22,000 churches and 4 million people to create small group curriculum for them.
Wow.
So we have a catalog of small group curriculum. We have a book called The Cure for Groups, How to Lead a Small Group that people will talk about the rest of their lives. So you can buy the book, give it to your small group leader for them to go, oh, that makes sense. That's how to lead. Then we have a small group study that they could lead their new group through to start it with intentionality and purpose and direction. And that's a small group study called Embark, how to launch or reignite your small group. And that's on Right Now Media. And then we have other small group curriculum. And so we're building a toolbox of tools that would equip you as a pastor to go, I don't have time and energy to develop this holistic spiritual formation model for all my small groups. I bet Trueface has different tools that I could use across the spectrum of training to deeper discipleship. I can use some of their tools and apply it into my environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So this is going to be a unique question. So, for example, what would you expect from somebody who's been trained when you walk into their small group? Since we're using that as an example, what are some of the things that you would expect now that person's been trained up when I as a new person enter into the environment? Just some of the maybe 2 things that would be in the atmosphere, if you will, or in the experience of me.
Yeah, well, I'll answer that, but first, from studying, I was responsible for, I oversaw I was the director of adult ministries at North Point Church with Andy's family. So we had hundreds and hundreds of groups that I felt responsibility to be able to answer that for. And so it would be, first of all, the equation, if I was going to evaluate a small group leader, I think about 65% of the equation of out of 100% of a group being transformational, 65% is contingent correlated to the health of the leader, their maturity, their security, and their identity.
Right.
So I would say, Rachel, how healthy are you in your own life? Giving that a thumbs up, because that's a lifelong journey of all of us on our process of maturing. there's about 25% that's very practical things that I could equip you with to be a more effective small group leader. And about 15% is just like organic. Like, did you get fired? Did somebody, what's the organic stuff you can't, that's not prescriptive in a small group environment.
Right.
So the 25% is kind of the controllables of how I can equip you to move the needle. And there are 5 core components after studying hundreds of groups that differentiate the ones that are intentional and really thoughtful versus the ones that most of us have experienced, which is like, oh, what do we want to talk about this week? And, too determined by the personality of the leader. So those 5 components are, from a metaphor in the Cure for Groups, we break it down into a sailing metaphor of the destination, the captain, the crew, the ship, and the route. The destination is, does that leader have an idea, and the group have an idea of the goals, where they're headed as a group? If you don't know the why you're meeting, you're not going to keep investing 90 minutes a week or 60 minutes a week to show up to something and you don't know why.
Right.
We're too busy. The second is the captain modeling vulnerability and intentionality as the key things that they can lean into and be intentional with. The third component is the crew. What's the group culture? Every group, every family has a family system, a group culture. Have you spoken into and clarified what kind of culture we have? At most of our works, we have values and cultures that we adhere to. But then you get into a group with the goal of following Jesus and learning to do that, and we're like, oh, it's not important. There's a lot we can learn from best practices in businesses.
Yeah.
And then the shift, how you design your time for transformation. 90 minutes, what's your plan? At business, your boss has a 90-minute meeting. If he doesn't have a plan, you know it. Versus the intentionality and the route. Does a small group leader plan out 4 to 6 months at a time to be intentional with the journey to get to the destination? Or do they just show up and go, hey, what do we want to study next? And then you lack intentionality. So those are the 5. You asked for 2. I gave you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was very helpful just to kind of understand the tools. And because, a lot of us don't think about that. We just think whether we're going to go to a small group or be a leader, we're just like, yeah, sure, I have a nice home, sure, invite people over, talk and all that. But the experience of it is, all of us, we don't want, I speaking for myself and I know others, you just want to be able to really connect and not waste your time, not feel like it's kind of just surfacey stuff. And you want to feel like you can be vulnerable and have a group of people supporting you and helping you to grow to be better in Christ. That's the goal. Yeah.
And I mean, it's no. He said, "You're a body. You have different gifts, strengths. Gather together, and where the church gathers, that is the church.
Right.
So, church, ecclesia, is just a gathering of believers.
Right.
So, compared to New Testament stuff, our small groups look a lot more like early church than a lot of our organizational churches in the West. But we don't function that way. We treat the small groups as kind of an afterthought, or just something to do instead of the intentionality that could lead to those being such a rich catalyst for us on our journey of following Jesus.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting that I'm interviewing you at this time because for me, just spiritually where I'm at, certainly the corporate gathering is great and stuff, but I need something more. And so I just the other day was like, I need to try to get connected into a small group. It just seems more, it'll give me more, for lack of better words, just because, we can go into the corporate gathering. We don't even talk to anybody. I just, walk to your seat real quick, listen to the pastor, do some worship, and then you're out, so it's no connecting. And sometimes it can feel awkward just, walking back and forth too. If you don't see anybody in the service, and you maybe don't want to talk to anybody. I mean, you can literally just go into a service and not talk to anybody at all or look anybody in the eye and get in your car. So, but the small group aspect just adds community, adds getting to know people. People are on your side. You can share your disappointments and share your joys. And I think it's very important. So thank you for what you guys do. I'm going to give your website and organizations too. Like, do you have to be a Christian organization, or do people who are just secular too come to you guys?
Yeah, we work with both. Over 26 years, we've done organizational consulting and work because it's interesting. There's correlations of creating a high trust environment, a community of grace. It's an art of, it's art and science mixed. And so we have worked with leadership teams and secular organizations because the principles that lead to a transformational, smaller community, it's interesting how much of this correlation leads to like a healthy leadership team,
right,
or an executive team in an organization. And we have a book that the founders wrote called The Ascent of a Leader, which is a purely secular organization leadership book.
Great.
On character and integrity that has been used in all kinds of different environments. So primarily our emphasis is relational discipleship tools, but we have worked with organizations and leadership teams.
I love that. Yeah. And that too is kind of planting a seed in that organization. Say, hey, this is a Christian, and, opening their eyes. And, with that, you can get more people into the kingdom of Christ. I love what you guys are doing. We'll be in touch. We'll have you back, because I feel like we just barely even talked about all that's possible with your organization and how you can help people. But we'll have you back on the show. And I just want to give the website. That's trueface.org, trueface.org. Super cool. Thank you so much for coming on Corner Cafe.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, we'll be in touch, and we're going to go to a break. Stay tuned.
I love coffee. I love tea.